Why would a man just minutes away from being executed in the dreaded electric chair at Huntsville Prison in Texas make a request that shocked everyone? Elias Thorne, condemned for a heinous crime, did not plead for pardon or clemency. His last and only demand was simple, yet charged with a searing pain: bring my dog before you kill me. What seemed like the final plea of a desperate convict was, in reality, the invisible key to a buried truth. A loyalty capable of disarming cold justice and exposing a devastating conspiracy. What did this faithful dog carry that could change Elias's fate and reveal the whereabouts of the missing girl? Why would a man condemned to the electric chair insist on the presence of his dog in his final moments of life? The execution chamber in the state prison of Huntsville, Texas, was sterile and cold, illuminated only by the harsh fluorescent lights. Elias Thorne sat strapped into the electric chair, his wrists secured by thick leather restraints. There was no fear in his eyes, but something deeper, a crushing emptiness, as if the world had already taken everything from him. He looked at the chaplain, a young man named Father Michael, and made a request that stunned everyone in the room, the warden, the guards, and the witnesses. "Please, Father, bring Zeus, my dog, before you kill me," he said, his voice breaking the sepulchral silence. The chaplain hesitated. Elias insisted. He couldn't face death without seeing his best friend again. "He is all I have left. I miss him so much." It was a simple plea, but one loaded with a raw, desperate nostalgia that even the most hardened guards felt. Elias, a simple caretaker who had worked on a large estate in upstate New York, had been convicted of a heinous crime, but his singular focus in his last hour was his loyal companion. 3 months earlier, in March 1963, the farm where Elias worked was a normal place. Clara Davis, the 10-year-old daughter of the landowner, Mr. Jonathan Davis, was the property's light, her laughter echoing across the vast fields of upstate New York. She ran among the apple trees with Zeus always by her side. Elias, a quiet, simple man, lived discreetly in a small cabin near the main house, his life defined by the companionship of Zeus, whom he had rescued years prior. Then, one quiet morning, everything changed. Clara vanished without a trace. The farm, once vibrant with Clara's laughter, was plunged into chaos. The girl who always appeared for breakfast with a smile was nowhere. Mr. Jonathan Davis, the farmer, frantically called the police, and the search began immediately across the vast estate. Elias Thorne, devastated, also joined the search, combing the apple orchards and open fields with Zeus by his side, calling Clara's name. Elias knew every corner of the property and offered his help wherever needed. However, the looks from the other farmhands and the local police force, mainly based in the nearby town of Albany, quickly turned suspicious. Elias was a solitary, reserved man. To many, his quiet nature was reason enough for distrust. He was the outsider. 2 days later, the investigation took a grim, terrifying turn. Police found something inside, Elias's simple cabin that seemed to be the damning proof everyone was seeking: Clara's dress, stained with what appeared to be blood, and a torn teddy bear soiled with dirt. The discovery was catastrophic. Mr. Davis, seeing the objects, fell to his knees, consumed by a brutal mixture of grief and blinding rage. For the local community, this was all the confirmation they needed. The isolated caretaker had kidnapped and murdered the child. Even without a body, the evidence found was sufficient for the people to believe the worst. Elias, for his part, was utterly stunned. He vehemently denied any involvement in Clara's disappearance. "This is a mistake. I would never hurt her," he shouted as police officers led him away. But who would listen to the word of a poor, solitary man against such seemingly clear evidence? Zeus, loyal as always, tried to chase the police car, but one of the officers restrained him. The animal's desperate barks echoed down the dusty road as Elias disappeared. It was as if the dog instinctively knew that something terribly wrong was happening, yet was powerless to stop it. In the days that followed, Clara's absence transformed the Davis estate in upstate New York into a somber, silent place. Mr. Jonathan Davis and his wife, Mrs. Martha Davis, were consumed by grief and utter mistrust. Their pain was a palpable entity, suffocating the once vibrant farm. Meanwhile, Zeus, lost without his master, wandered the property relentlessly. The loyal dog sniffed the ground, circling Elias's cabin as if searching for answers that no human could decipher. He seemed to be guarding the empty space where his friend had been. Inside the state prison in Huntsville, Elias Thorne spent his days clinging to memories of Zeus. For Elias, the dog was far more than just a pet. He was family. He was always by my side, always. Even through the worst times, Elias told the prison chaplain, Father Michael, his voice heavy with longing. The ache of missing Zeus consumed him more fiercely than the fear of the electric chair. In the packed courtroom for the trial, the silence was almost as deafening as the previous. Raging screams. Mrs. Martha Davis's fragile figure was cloaked in a black veil that did little to hide the despair etched across her face. Sitting beside Mr. Jonathan Davis, Martha clutched a handkerchief already soaked with tears. Jonathan's face, usually proud and hard as rock, was now pale, his fists clenched, struggling to contain the cold fury in his eyes. Martha's voice echoed in the courtroom, a lament mixed with raw fury as she pointed directly at Elias. "Where is Clara? Where is my daughter?" She suddenly rose, only to be restrained by Jonathan, who pulled her back down. His own voice, however, was icy and sharp when he finally spoke. "You are a monster, Elias, and now my daughter is dead." Elias, sitting at the defense table, looked utterly destroyed. His eyes were fixed on the floor, lacking the strength to confront the tidal wave of hatred directed at him. Elias Thorne's defense attorney, a young man who clearly seemed out of his depth against the public's fury, struggled to contain the prosecutor's merciless avalanche of accusations. "Mr. Thorne," the prosecutor began, his voice dripping with condescension, "you lived alone on the Davis estate, no family, no witnesses. All the evidence points directly to you, the clothing, the toy, the blood, and you offer no explanation. What do you have to say in your defense?" "I didn't do anything," Elias murmured, his voice hoarse and barely audible. "I would never hurt Clara. She was like a daughter to me." But the courtroom was uninterested in his pleas. The whispers among the public quickly escalated into scornful laughter and jeers. Mr. Jonathan Davis, ignoring the judge's attempts to maintain order, rose from his seat, his face contorted with unbridled rage. "Stop lying. Tell us where the body is. Tell us now, you wretch." Elias looked at Jonathan with tears welling in his eyes. "I don't know. I swear on everything sacred, I don't know what happened to her." The days of the trial were swift and brutal. The community demanded justice, and they wanted it immediately. To the jurors, the evidence was simply too compelling. Clara's dress, the torn teddy bear, the blood. Despite the devastating absence of a body, the verdict was unanimous. Elias Thorne was convicted and sentenced to death in the electric chair. The verdict was met with a thunderous applause from the gallery, as if every clap were a blow struck against the accused. Jonathan fiercely embraced his wife, Mrs. Martha Davis, but his gaze remained fixed on Elias. He wanted vengeance more than he wanted justice. "May God have mercy on your soul," the judge declared, striking his gavel. Elias was led away in handcuffs, but not before looking out at the public. Amidst the faces contorted with scorn, he searched desperately for a single look of compassion or doubt. He found none. Unseen by Elias or the vengeful community, Zeus wandered the Davis estate, an animal lost and lonely in the absence of his master. The farm seemed to have lost its very soul. Zeus crisscrossed the fields, sniffing the air and searching the spots where he used to find Clara and Elias Thorne. He looked confused, as if expecting his friend to reappear at any moment, ready to give him a simple pat. For days the dog remained near Elias's small cabin, never straying far, as if guarding the place while waiting for his return. The other farmhands, consumed by their own woes and the tragedy of Clara's disappearance, mostly ignored Zeus. Only one of the older workers, a gentle man named Silas, occasionally left scraps of food for the loyal animal, but it wasn't enough. Zeus grew thin, his once vibrant coat dulling. He began scavenging for food nearby, slipping into chicken coops and overturning trash bins, a reflection of the physical and emotional decline that gripped the entire estate. Without Clara, the girl who illuminated the place, and with Mr. and Mrs. Davis swallowed by their pain, the property itself seemed to wither. The grain harvest plummeted, farm hands quit for work elsewhere, and Mr. Davis's ledgers began to show accumulating debts. Inside the main farmhouse, the suffering was unbearable. Mr. Jonathan Davis, always a proud and authoritative man, now spent his days silently in his study, drinking more than he should. His eyes were constantly red, whether from alcohol or unshed tears. Mrs. Martha Davis, meanwhile, barely left their bedroom, staring out the window for hours as if expecting to see Clara run across the yard again. One evening, Martha found an old dress of Clara's in the closet. Clutching the fabric, she collapsed on the floor, screaming in a way that terrified the servants. "She can't be dead. My girl isn't dead." When Jonathan tried to comfort her, Martha pushed him away, her eyes blazing with raw anguish. "Do you think this is justice? Do you think his death will bring our daughter back?" Jonathan had no reply. He knew Martha was right, but he couldn't abandon the consuming hatred he felt for Elias. In his mind, the caretaker had destroyed his family. The rumors about Elias Thorne's trial and his impending execution quickly spread. The small town near the Davis estate became a focal point of morbid curiosity. Meanwhile, the estate continued its decline. Without Clara and the farmhands who had sought work on other properties, the production plummeted. Zeus continued his solitary wanderings, seeming tireless in his search for something no one else could see. Occasionally, he would stop at those strange, specific spots on the farm, sniffing and barking, but no one paid attention. To the few remaining farmhands, he was just a stray dog, mournful and lost. In the state prison in Huntsville, Elias awaited death. He received no visitors except for the chaplain, Father Michael, who offered counsel. But Elias didn't want words of comfort. He wanted answers. "I am not guilty," he murmured to himself. "Clara, where are you?" His thoughts constantly returned to Zeus. He wondered if the dog was safe, if anyone was caring for him. "He must be waiting for me," Elias thought, and that thought, however heartbreaking, was true. The silence of the cell was unbearable. Elias sat in the darkest corner, head bowed, his eyes fixed on the cold concrete floor. He had lost track of how many days had passed since the judge decreed his sentence. Only the calendar scratched into the wall reminded him that each passing day brought him closer to the electric chair. But what truly hurt wasn't the sound of the keys in the iron doors or the creaking boots of the guards. What consumed Elias was the heavy weight of his own mind, an incessant question that tormented him. Who did this? The evidence against him was too clean. Clara's blood-stained clothes and the teddy bear were found in his cabin. Elias couldn't deny they were there, but he had no idea how they had arrived. "I must have been careless. Someone was here and I didn't notice," he thought, desperately searching his memory for any detail, any suspicious face. Elias Thorne's mind was a suffocating labyrinth. Who would have the cruelty to hurt a child? Why frame me? These questions repeated like an endless echo in his head. Every memory of Clara Davis, her running through the fields with Zeus, her ringing laughter as he watched her with a smile tightened the knot in his heart. She was pure, innocent. I would never be able to hurt her. She was like a daughter to me, he murmured to himself, but the cold walls of the prison cell only returned silence. Elias often cried, clutching his chest as if trying to contain the grief tearing him apart. The loneliness was unbearable. He felt like a ghost, a dead man still breathing. Meanwhile, the Davis estate, the place he once called home, was also crumbling. Zeus, now utterly alone, spent his days wandering the fields, sniffing the ground in search of a familiar scent. At night, he would return to Elias's cabin, as if convinced his master would return at any moment. He would lie on the old wooden bed where Elias used to rest and let out small whimpers, mournful sounds that mirrored the despair of the whole property. The remaining farmhands began to notice the dog's strange behavior. Silas commented, "He seems to miss the caretaker." But Zeus barely ate, spending most of his time near the bed or circling the yard, expectant. Inside the cell, the calendar on the wall was marked day after day. Each mark represented an eternity, but also a step closer to the end. Elias knew time was running out, but the idea of giving up was inconceivable. "If I give up, who else will fight for me?" he thought. At the same time, a sense of powerlessness overwhelmed him. "I have no proof of my innocence. There is no one who can help me. What can a man like me do against the world? I am just a caretaker. No one will hear my side of the story," he told himself between sobs. Zeus was the only thing that still made Elias Thorne smile, even if just for a fleeting moment. He remembered the day he found the dog, a abandoned puppy, near a creek. Elias had taken him home, tended to his wounds, and given him a name. "You're my best friend, my Zeus," he had said then. Now that memory seemed heartbreakingly distant. Is anyone taking care of him? He often wondered, genuinely more concerned about the dog than about his own impending death. The nostalgia was a pain worse than any physical suffering. He yearned to see him again, just one last time. The metallic clang of keys in the corridor was a constant, stark reminder of what was to come. The guards didn't speak to Elias, but their expressions made it clear they were counting the days until he was taken to the electric chair. Elias sat in the corner of his cell, his hands clasped over his knees, his gaze lost. He knew time was running out, but a faint spark in his heart whispered that the end hadn't truly arrived. He closed his eyes, and for a brief moment he saw Zeus running through the fields, barking happily. A single tear rolled down his face. When the guards came to fetch him, Elias stood up with difficulty, his knees trembling not from fear, but from the crushing emotional weight he carried. As he walked through the corridors, other inmates watched him in silence. Some gently tapped the bars in a gesture of respect, while others simply looked away. In the main corridor, the chaplain, Father Michael, awaited him. "Are you ready, my son?" he asked softly. Elias nodded, his voice cracking as he replied, "I can't die without seeing Zeus. He is all I have left." He interrupted the chaplain's attempts at spiritual comfort. "Please, ask them to bring my dog. I just want to say goodbye to him." Just that. He began to cry, sobbing loudly, as if months of despair were finally pouring out all at once. The guards exchanged uncertain glances. None of them had ever encountered such a request in the solemn final minutes. To ask for a dog at a time like this was unheard of. The chaplain, Father Michael, intervened gently. "Perhaps we should grant his request. It is his last wish, after all. We cannot deny a man about to die this small solace." After a tense period of hesitation, the prison director, a severe man named Warden Thompson, finally conceded. His voice cut through the silence, though his face betrayed a hint of internal conflict. "Find the dog. Suspend the execution until he arrives." The news spread rapidly through the prison. Many were surprised by the delay, but others, even the most hardened convicts, felt a strange knot tighten in their throats. There was something profoundly, rawly human in Elias's desire. Hours later, a car pulled up to the prison gates. Inside was Zeus, thin and dusty, but with eyes still bright with fierce loyalty. As the door opened, the dog leaped out, pulling against the leash held by a guard. He sniffed the air, as if knowing exactly where he needed to go. When Zeus was led into the execution chamber, the entire atmosphere shifted. The heavy silence was broken by the sharp sound of his paws on the floor and a loud bark, almost a cry of reunion. Elias Thorne, still secured in the electric chair, lifted his head. Seeing his faithful friend, he started to weep openly. "Zeus, my friend, you came," Elias whispered, his voice trembling. The dog ran to him, jumped onto his lap, and began to lick his face, whimpering with small, heartbroken sounds that moved everyone in the room. Elias Thorne caressed Zeus's head, laughing and crying simultaneously. "You were always with me, weren't you? I knew you would come." The guards, the chaplain, and even Warden Thompson were deeply moved. Some turned away, trying to conceal their tears. The bond between Elias and Zeus was so pure, so profoundly human, that no one could remain indifferent. "I have no one else, Zeus. You always believed in me, didn't you?" Elias murmured as the dog licked his hands. In that moment, everything that had happened seemed to vanish. Elias was no longer a condemned man, and Zeus was not just a dog. They were two souls connected by an unconditional love. Suddenly, Zeus began moving his mouth strangely, as if chewing something. Elias, thinking it was a piece of food, joked softly, "What do you have there, Zeus? A present for me?" The dog lowered his head and dropped two small objects onto the floor. The room fell silent. Elias picked up the objects with trembling hands. The first was a small tooth, which appeared to have fallen out recently. He instantly knew what it was. "It's Clara's tooth," he whispered, horrified but suddenly alert. The second object was a small piece of partially eaten fruit. Elias recognized it immediately. It was a variety of fruit that only grew on the neighboring farm, owned by Mr. Victor Sterling, the Davises' rival farmer. Elias looked at the chaplain, then at the guards. "This proves Clara is alive. She was on the neighboring farm. Zeus found this." His voice was shaking with emotion, but also with a fierce determination no one had ever witnessed in him before. The guards looked at Warden Thompson, who seemed as utterly confused as everyone else. The chaplain, holding the tooth and the fruit, declared, "We must investigate this. If there's a chance Clara is alive, we cannot ignore it." The director hesitated, but he knew he couldn't proceed with the execution in the face of this revelation. "Suspend the execution immediately," he ordered, as guards quickly rushed out to relay the news. Elias Thorne was carefully removed from the electric chair, his hands trembling but his eyes brimming with tears of relief. As guards escorted him back to his cell, he held Zeus close as if his life still depended on it. The dog seemed to sense the shift in the atmosphere, wagging his tail frantically and letting out small yelps of excitement. Warden Thompson, despite his usual severity, permitted something unexpected. "Let him keep his friend tonight. It's the least we can do." Stepping into the cell, Elias knelt on the concrete floor, and Zeus immediately jumped into his lap, licking his face. "Ah, Zeus, how I missed you." Elias laughed and cried at the same time. The dog continued licking, trying to make up for all the lost time in a single instant. The cell, previously somber and oppressive, seemed to come alive. Elias poured water into a small plastic cup he kept by his makeshift bed. "Drink, my friend. You must be thirsty." Zeus drank eagerly, and Elias couldn't take his eyes off him. "You're here. It's real. I'm not alone anymore." After quenching his thirst, the dog began to explore the small space, sniffing every corner as if trying to understand the strange place where his master had been confined. Elias laughed. "There's not much to see here, boy, but you can do whatever you want." For a moment, the crushing weight of the conviction and the injustice vanished. Elias grabbed a piece of cloth he used as a pillow and began to play tug-of-war with Zeus. The dog gently mouthed the cloth, his tail wagging furiously. Elias laughed aloud, a sound he hadn't produced in months. "You truly are my hero. I knew you never gave up on me. Never." Guards passing in the corridor glanced discreetly at the scene. Some smiled, others simply shook their heads, trying to comprehend how something so simple could be so powerful. Elias sat on the floor with Zeus curled up beside him. "Remember when I found you, little one? You were lost, skinny, almost lifeless. And look at you now saving my life. Who would have thought?" The dog responded with a soft whimper, resting his head on Elias's chest. "You know I'd do anything for you, don't you? You're more than a dog. You're my family." The happiness was interrupted by the sound of footsteps in the corridor. A guard stopped in front of the cell and called out to Elias Thorne. "Thorne, I need to speak with you." Elias slowly rose, still stroking Zeus. "What's happening now?" he asked, unable to hide his concern. The guard hesitated before answering, as if anticipating the difficulty of the news. "We need to take Zeus. The warden has authorized him to join the search for Clara. That tooth and the fruit he brought are only leads. He could be the key to finding the girl." Elias felt his heart tighten. He looked at Zeus, who seemed to sense the imminent separation, and then back at the guard. "He just got here. We barely had time to be together again." Elias's voice broke as he held Zeus's snout in his hands. "I don't want you to go, my friend. But if this means we can save Clara, I won't stop you." Elias knelt once more and looked directly into Zeus's eyes. "You're my hero. You know that? You have to go. Go find Clara." He kissed the dog's forehead, tears streaming down his face. Zeus let out a small whimper, as if trying to reply, and wagged his tail slowly. His eyes fixed on Elias's, equally reluctant to part. Elias stroked Zeus one last time and stood up, turning to the guard. "Take good care of him, please." "He's all I have." The guard nodded seriously. "We will do our best." When the cell door opened, Zeus looked back at Elias, hesitated for an instant, but followed the guard, albeit reluctantly. The sound of his paws echoed down the corridor as Elias watched him disappear around the bend, struggling fiercely not to collapse again. "Go, my friend. Show the world what I already know: you are amazing." These were Elias's last words before Zeus vanished. Silence returned to the cell, but this time it was different. Elias felt a profound emptiness, yet also a powerful spark of hope. He knew Zeus would do the impossible. "I love you, Zeus," he murmured, sitting back down, tears on his face but a new light in his eyes. The sun had barely risen when police vehicles arrived at the farm of Mr. Victor Sterling, the Davises' rival neighbor, located just outside Albany. The property was large, surrounded by a sturdy wooden gate and a rusted fence. Leading the operation were the police chief and the judge who had authorized the search warrant. Among the officers, Zeus, Elias Thorne's faithful companion, waited restlessly, his body tense and his eyes fixed on the entrance, as if knowing the moment of truth had arrived. Behind the police group, Mr. Jonathan Davis and Mrs. Martha Davis watched, visibly shaken. Jonathan, his face grim, gripped his wife's arm, while Martha couldn't contain her tears. "If she's here, if my Clara is here, ... she repeated, almost like a prayer. "What is happening here? Why are you on my property?" Sterling's voice was deep, but there was a slight tremor that did not go unnoticed by the police chief. "We have a warrant to search for a missing girl," the chief replied, holding up the document. "Open the gate." Sterling hesitated. "This is absurd. There is nothing to find here. You're wasting your time," he argued, but the authority of the warrant was undeniable. Reluctantly, the rival farmer opened the gate and the group advanced. As soon as they crossed the property line, Zeus seemed overtaken by an invisible force. He sniffed the air, took a few hesitant steps, and then began to run, pulling the officer who held his leash. "Let him lead," the chief commanded. "He knows what he's doing." Zeus ran as if he knew the terrain better than anyone. He crossed an open field, past the orchards, and entered the vineyard, where rows of tall grapevines formed a natural labyrinth. Sterling followed closely, visibly nervous. "You're trespassing. There's nothing here but leaves and dirt," he repeated, but his words were losing all weight. Zeus suddenly stopped in the middle of the vineyard, sniffing the ground and barking intensely at a specific spot. As the police approached, they noticed something strange. The ground was covered with dry leaves and branches, as if someone had tried to conceal something. Zeus began to dig frantically at a point on the mound. One of the guards noticed the difference in the terrain. "This isn't natural." Upon removing the leaves and branches, they found a wooden structure with a rusty lever. It was a trapdoor that seemed to lead to an underground location. The silence that followed was broken only by Zeus's urgent barks, who now pulled the chief towards the entrance. The trapdoor was opened with difficulty, revealing a staircase that descended into a dark, damp space. "Prepare the lanterns," ordered the police chief. The first to descend were the officers, followed by Mr. Jonathan Davis and Mrs. Martha Davis, who insisted on joining the search. Victor Sterling tried to stop them but was restrained by 2 guards. Descending into the bunker, the smell of mold and the shadows created a suffocating atmosphere. Deep inside the bunker, they heard a faint sound like a sob. Martha's heart raced. "Clara! Clara!" She called out, her voice trembling, but there was no reply. Zeus descended with them, running ahead, guided by his sharp nose. He stopped before a small metal door, scratching and barking intensely. When the police forced the door open, the sight was devastating. Clara Davis was sitting in a corner of the small space, her wrists and ankles bound, her head resting against the wall. Her face was pale, and her eyes, swollen from crying, could barely stay open. She was wearing the same clothes as the day she disappeared, now dirty and worn. "Clara!" screamed Martha, running to her daughter. Jonathan followed, kneeling beside the girl and undoing the ropes with trembling hands. "My daughter, my love, we are here." Martha hugged Clara fiercely, as if to protect her from all the world's harm. Clara opened her eyes with difficulty and murmured, "Mommy ... daddy ... Her voice was weak, but those words were enough to fill Martha's heart with hope. Zeus, faithful as ever, approached Clara, gently licking her hands. The girl managed a small smile when she saw him. "Zeus, you found me," she whispered, before closing her eyes again, exhausted. Meanwhile, Victor Sterling, held by the guards outside, watched the police emerge with Clara in their arms. His expression shifted from defensive to utterly terrified. He knew his time for lies was over. "You knew this all along," the police chief said, looking at Sterling with contempt. "This girl was hidden here while you claimed there was nothing to find." Sterling tried to justify himself, stammering, "This is not what it looks like. I've nothing to do with this." But his words met only cold, unyielding silence. The chief signaled to the guards, "Take him. He has a lot of explaining to do." As Clara was taken to the hospital, Zeus was allowed to accompany her. The chief personally called Warden Thompson at the prison. "Suspend everything. We have proof Elias Thorne is innocent. Clara is alive, and the guilty party has been identified." Inside his cell, Elias Thorne sat staring at the floor when the guard rushed in. "Elias, they found Clara. And it's all thanks to Zeus." Elias brought his hands to his face, unable to stop the torrent of tears. "I knew it. I knew he was special. I knew he wouldn't let me down." The day Elias never thought he would live to see finally arrived. After months of isolation, suffering, and uncertainty, he was freed. At the prison gate, the heavy iron doors slowly swung open, revealing a bright, sunny sky. Standing before him was Zeus, tail wagging fiercely, eyes shining, as if he knew everything was finally right. When Elias crossed the threshold, Zeus ran, barking, and leaped onto his chest. "Zeus," Elias whispered, embracing the dog, tears of relief streaming down his face. Their already unbreakable bond now seemed stronger than steel. News about Victor Sterling, the rival farmer, dominated the state. He was arrested, swiftly brought to trial, and confessed to the crime in exchange for a reduced sentence. Sterling revealed his motivation was purely selfish, to destroy Mr. Jonathan Davis's farm and ensure his own prosperity. "I wanted to see his property sink while mine flourished," he admitted chillingly. Sterling received a severe sentence, 50 years for kidnapping, attempted murder, and falsification of evidence. He went from a respected farmer to a monster despised by all. Clara's recovery was slow but filled with love. Mrs. Martha Davis never left her daughter's side. Mr. Davis, despite his rigid demeanor, broke down in tears when he saw Clara smile again. Clara eventually returned to being the sweet, cheerful girl she once was. "Zeus found me," she often said. The dog became an inseparable companion, sleeping by her bed and barking whenever she needed comfort. Jonathan and Martha knew they owed Elias an unpayable debt. On the day he was released, they visited him. Elias, I don't even know where to begin, Mr. Davis started, his voice thick with shame. We judged you and condemned you in our hearts even before the court. There are no words, double quotes, Mrs. Davis, tears welling up, continued. You were part of our family, and we betrayed you, yet you saved our daughter. Please, forgive us. Elias listened in silence. He had spent months consumed by the pain of abandonment, but in that moment, he felt forgiveness was the only path forward. I forgive you, he said quietly, but I hope you remember one thing. Justice is not done with hatred, but with love and truth. The entire town seemed to be consumed by collective guilt. The local pastor organized an event where he publicly declared, "We all failed Elias. We judged a man without knowing him, and this must be a lesson for us all." Elias accepted the apologies humbly, but made it clear that the true hero was Zeus. If it weren't for him, none of this would have happened. He saved Clara, he saved me, he saved us all. Zeus became a local celebrity, receiving a police medal and articles in the state newspaper. Elias also did not leave empty-handed. He successfully sued the state for his wrongful imprisonment and received a substantial settlement, enough to change his life forever. He bought a small farm away from the city, a quiet place where he could start over. On the new farm, Elias found the peace he had sought. He and Zeus were no longer alone. They were joined by 5 other rescue dogs. Now you're the leader of the pack, Zeus, he would joke. As the day ended, Elias watched the sunset from his porch, Zeus by his side, the other dogs playing nearby. We did it, Zeus. We went through all that, and we're here together. You always believed in me, and I will never let you down. Zeus rested his head on Elias's lap, as if understanding every word. Under a sky painted orange and red, 2 souls prove that even in the darkest adversities, love and loyalty can illuminate the path. If the unwavering loyalty of Zeus and the victory of truth touched your heart, your journey doesn't end here. Subscribe to the channel right now to receive more stories of hope, triumph, and justice. Don't miss any lessons on the power of love and faith. Click subscribe and turn on notifications. Join our community and prove that, just like Elias and Zeus, you also believe that love saves.